my name is Phoebe Furman. I'm here to host this workshop that you are attending. It's the Rebuild workshop entitled Pastoring People in Digital Spaces, and it's co-hosted by the wonderful Reverend Grace Douglas and Peter Englert. So, yes. Reverend Grace Holly Douglas is a woman of faith who loves all of God's people. Reverend Douglas actively serves in the ministerial staff at Zion Hill Missionary Baptist Church. She is a gifted teacher, speaker, and workshop leader. Teaching and administration are dear to her heart. She currently serves as director to Evangelism Explosion, which is a 13-week training ministry that teaches laypersons to share,
to share the gospel in laundromats, in homes, and on the streets. So awesome. That's what I do.
Wonderful. And Peter Englert is Adult Ministries Director at Browncroft Community Church. He graduated from the University of Valley Forge with a bachelor's in pastoral ministry and a master's in theology. He hosts the podcast, Why God, Why, which has featured several Roberts Wesleyan, they cut me off twice, for the digital workshop.
Wonderful people from Roberts Wesleyan Northeastern Seminary. Give it up for J.P. Anderson in the back.
Awesome. All right, so I will hand it over to our workshop.
Technology is best when it brings people together. Today, we're bringing two people who have never met each other before together on stage because we come from different backgrounds, church backgrounds, different diversities, and we love technology, although we might be a little technologically challenged. I'm a baby boomer. Therefore, share this story with you before we began. I used to not have a cell phone. I used to hate cell phones. Matter of fact, if anybody asked me to use a cell phone or told me that I had to use a cell phone, I'd get an argument with them, and I'd argue with them for half an hour on the reasons why I did not need a cell phone. But God is good, and therefore, there came a time when I did need a cell phone. And so, here I am. Sometimes I can't do without this. That's dangerous. So next slide, please. So what do we plan to accomplish in our time together? We're going to do some further introductions and tell our stories, our technology stories. We're going to talk a little bit about pre-COVID technology, mid-COVID technology, and post-COVID use of technology. Then we're going to open it up for your questions. You can ask us any question that you want. I'm not sure if we'll be able to answer it, but we'll get some answers for you. Thank you. Okay. So the only thing I wanted to add to what's your name, ma'am? Phoebe. To what Phoebe said is that I'm a pastor's wife. Y'all supposed to clap. Why are you clapping? Because pastors' wives get a chance to do what everybody else decide they don't want to do. All right, Peter, one more slide. Go ahead, Peter.
It's hard to follow up after Reverend Grace, but I'll try. So one of the things that Grace and I talked about when we Zoomed is just our generational differences. And what I love about Grace that I never had to experience was, and you're going to hear this in her story, is Grace, maybe like many of you, there's no one else tech in her church, and she had to figure it out. So I give her a ton of credit. I serve at Browncroft Community Church, and just a little bit of my story is, before we get to in there, I didn't go looking for technology. I think some people assume that, Peter does it and loves it. My joke is my freshman year of college, this little social media platform called Facebook started. And so in some ways, I became part of the millennial generation like Phoebe, that just technology was upon us at the right time. So I just want to kind of start there. The other thing too is, I gotta do this. I gotta brag on my pastor's wife, my wife, Robin. She was one of the panelists this morning. I thought all the panelists were awesome, but also, a lot of what I've learned and engaged in technology has come from her. And then I have two daughters, Haley, who's 5 years old. We like to call her the chief operating officer of our family. And then Lucy, our 2-year-old, we like to call her the CEO. She kind of runs the show. We might talk a little bit about that later. But here we go. We're here for why you came here.
Thank you, Peter. At Zion Hill, our tech vision is flow. That's connecting you to Christ through fellowship, leadership, outreach, and worship using advanced technology and social media platforms. So our outreach and worship, our evangelism, per se, and discipleships are parts of our educational and outreach ministries. So we include technology within that framework. Can you go ahead, Peter?
All right. So what's interesting about this slide is within the last 48 hours, this actually changed. We have a brand new mission statement. I just want to read it to you. It's pretty close to this one, but it says, providing an online presence so people can learn about and connect with the church to grow spiritually. So on the slide, we use the word connection. So at Browncroft, very similar to Reverend Grace, we see that this platform, this technology, as Mark Macklot was talking yesterday, we realize and accept that there's a level of discipleship that happens on our screens. And that's not just for Gen Z and Alpha, but that's every generation. And also, too, we realize that to live incarnationally in the 21st century means having a presence online. So that's really been our guiding principle and mission that we'll talk more about as we talk about before COVID.
Meeting people in digital spaces. Let that sink in your head. Meeting people in digital spaces. So part of our tech stories, let's go with the first pre-COVID. And I don't know if you see this, but those were days of glory where we could come into the sanctuary. Some of us had screens up already. Some of us did not. But we had each other. We could sit and we could hold each other's hands. We could hug them. That was pre-COVID. So let me give you a little story about my technology experience during prior to COVID. Before COVID-19, our ministry depended highly upon print media to prepare for worship services, church activities. So snap your fingers if you use letters, flyers, this is pre-COVID, church bulletins, sheet music. I see it, I hear a little snap, ooh, good. We also used email. Go ahead, snap your fingers. On occasion to invite the community to special events, but we were not connecting with members on social media platforms beyond our personal Facebook pages. So you can see a bunch of church people going on Facebook. So technology in the church was mostly AV equipment. We had computers, overhead projectors, the AV equipment, and we used them for in-person workshops, conferences, and meetings. But I became interested in digital technology around 2000. Somebody say 2000. I know I'm dating myself. My husband had just become the pastor of the Zion Hill Missionary Baptist Church, and we had a lot of young people who were showing an interest in teaching the congregation to use things like email. Not a lot of us baby boomers knew that. PowerPoint, Word, and other computer programs. So you can imagine we had six, not even seven, six young engineers from Kodak and Xerox, and they were all interested in websites. Yeah, and these 6 young engineers were also interested in helping us get a website going. So they launched our first website. And you know, everybody started shouting because we had a website. Now we were online, we had a presence online, and people could come to our church just by looking us up online. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experience. However, 6 years later, the entire team that kept our website up, and I'm not talking about nobody in church, but kept our website up, they relocated to another state, and we were left without anyone to update our website. So being a lifelong learner, say lifelong learner, I taught myself, like pastors' wives do, how to build a website. Anybody ever heard of this book that's called Building a Website for Dummies? I looked at that thing and I just studied it almost like the Bible. But I was able to learn from that book along with watching videos, experimenting with web designer software. And so in 2014, I launched another website, and I've served as the administrator of that website for ever since. You go ahead, snap your hands. I need some credit here. So in-house, around 2015, some members of the church purchased monitors, large TVs. And so we started using video some presentation software for our worship services, and that reduced our use of paper bulletins by 99%. We were going digital. Before COVID, we did not have an official online presence beyond the church's website. Go ahead, Peter.
So I think there's some big similarities and differences with Grace and I, but I think the biggest similarity was when I started serving kind of in a digital capacity at Browncroft. It was kind of niche. So we had a website, we had Facebook, and you know those people that come to you and say, hey, I have this event coming up. Can you just announce it from the front, put it in the bulletin, put it on Facebook? That's the way people saw technology. They didn't necessarily see it in terms of discipleship. They didn't see it in terms of evangelism, and they didn't see it in terms of having a presence. So I'm about to pick on millennials because, everybody, has problems with millennials. But if you hear a typical millennial story, it goes something like this. I had coffee with someone, it was 2 hours, and we decided after that 2-hour coffee that we were going to start a podcast. So I'm telling you the truth about this because there's 3 people on staff with me at Browncroft that are sitting here, so I can't lie. So my friend John, who's actually sitting over there, we had talked about, hey, what's the best way to reach this next generation? So we decided to start a podcast called Why God Why. We didn't have a huge strategy meeting. I was surprised at how many people said yes. And in the middle of that also, our executive pastor at the time said, we need to start an online service. And I said, okay, what do you need me to do? Well, we need you to run it. So I started delving into what do online hosts do, what do chats do, and we started both podcast and the online service in 2019. And that's probably a good segue to talk about COVID.
Exactly. So during COVID, as I said before, around 2015, at our church, the small church Zion Hill, we moved from the printed bulletins, church bulletins, to the presentations. And about 3 months into using the presentations or the television to guide our worship services, people started getting used to it. And so we stopped passing out the bulletins altogether, and we just started posting them on our website so that members could have access. They could download them if they wanted to, or they could just view them on their devices. So we did that, and we thought we had made some significant advancements in technology until the pandemic hit. On Sunday, I remember it, March 15, 2020, we had a short meeting with the congregation after worship to explain the uncertainty of the pandemic and our anticipated moves forward. Unanimously, we decided to shut down and attempt online services via YouTube, although we had not done any live streaming before. This was a process that we had to do within 7 days. 6, really, because the 7th day was Sunday we had to be up. So Pastor and I met with one of our nurse practitioners, the chairman of the deacon board, to discuss the makeup of our church membership and how the change to digital worship would affect them. And so we concluded that the members that would be most affected would be those within the ages of 60, 65 years and above, because they were the ones that were less likely to be comfortable with using technology. They were the ones who had shown us a few years back when we were offering technology classes that they were afraid of technology. So, of course, I had to get young people involved as well as people like myself to help older, more senior persons within our congregation to become open to the idea of using technology for the services. So on March 20th, 2020, there was a mandated issue to close all the churches, and we were to shelter in place. Everybody remember that, right? Oh, yes, that was horrible. And there was a significant digital divide in our congregation. Now let's talk about the digital divide for a moment. I don't know if most of you have experienced it. Probably so. There is a digital divide. There's not only a generational divide or generational gap between young people and seniors, but there's a digital divide among congregations between younger people, younger members, and older senior members. And there's also a digital divide within the city of Rochester in reference to having access to internet and the capacity to do online worship. So when we had this meeting, we had to think about all of those things and to take all of that into consideration before we rolled out everything. So there were some people in our congregation who had smartphones. There were some people who had smart TVs, but there were a lot of people who did not. There were several people who did not have internet. The most that they did have was a phone, either a physical phone or a landline, or a mobile phone. So part of our work was to contact members 65 and above and asked if they had devices and asked if they had someone who was young, vibrant, and interested and patient enough with them to show them how to use the technology. So we had groups of young people who were helping people. I helped people. I called people. The staff at our church called people. We sent out newsletters with our directions on how we could do things. We taught, I in particularly taught Zoom classes, how to use Zoom, which was interesting. But God is good, and we were able to get people to be a little bit more comfortable with the fact that we all had to be at home in settings at home. So we had an old YouTube channel. Somebody said old. That thing was so old till I didn't know how to get in it. But God is good, so he showed me how to get into there. And I took that YouTube channel, we updated it, and that's the place we called our home during COVID. That was where people could get all the information along with our website from that YouTube channel. All our services were on the YouTube channel. We also developed Twitter, Facebook, Instagram pages, and the church invested in more equipment or hardware. And my son, who's here with us today, raise your hand, son. I told him I was going to call him out, so now he doesn't want to raise his hand, but that's okay. Because the reason I talk about him is because he called us and said he was coming back home. And I was like, no, you're not. And so, but the joy of him coming back home was the fact that he majored in telecommunications at Alabama A&M University. Yeah, you can clap for that. And so when it was a joy being the pastor's wife and didn't have to figure out how to do the live streaming all by myself. So he was in charge of doing the physical and my husband in charge of hardwiring the entire church, setting up our AV equipment at home so that we could stream from home. So we had first 8 or 9 months, we were streaming from home, had everything all set up, and we ran into some challenges. So I drew on the art. Like I said, I drew on my background in art. So I actually did all of the graphics for all social media channels. And I tried to teach other people, members, to do it. No one's ready yet, but they're coming. And we actually looked online, and we found something that's called eCam. eCam is a lifesaver for those people who have no experience in live streaming. So it made it very easy for us to connect our computers to YouTube through USB. And that's all because my son was so patient with us. From our living room, we streamed the morning worship service. We did our revivals. We did Bible study, all on YouTube and Facebook. And our prayer services, we did Zoom. And when we went from our home into the church, you could only meet with 10 people. Therefore, we set up a studio at our church, plus we had our pastor preach live from the sanctuary. We had all the recordings done in the recording room, in which my son was so gracious to do, the green room, for us. And so that's how we were able to get things done. And when we did meet with people online, they wanted me to get in front of the camera. I didn't want to do that. So basically what happened, my son became for our Bible study, my son became what I call the commentator, or you could call the host. So he filled, questions came in, he asked the questions, he reframed the questions, and he also asked the audience to type in the chat if the question that he reframed was reframed correctly. Now that takes a little tact and talent. Give him a hand clap. Go ahead, give him a hand clap. So that's how we connect, and we also connect through conference calls because some people are not ready, still not ready yet, and we respect that. We also connect through Messenger and emails, and most of the people during COVID was glad they just had something. They felt isolated, and they were glad they had something, so that's where I was during COVID. Too long, but I had to get it all out.
I appreciate that. I think as you heard Grace's story, many of you probably relate. Very similar, the moment that everything shut down, besides doing digital ministry, I was in charge of our small groups. So I had to send an email out to 65 small groups explaining how to use Zoom, explaining how to connect online and to provide that. One of the crazy things, and I think one of the things you can learn from Grace, we don't necessarily come as experts. And I'll just say this personally, I made a lot of mistakes. Probably one of the mistakes I made a few weeks before COVID was I started 7 Facebook groups. You're all laughing because you think it's crazy, and it was. And those were to represent the different types of ministries that we have. So we have a men's ministry, women's ministry, couples ministry, young adult ministry, and then there was a few other things that we added. And so during this time, if I was to sum up COVID in one word digitally, it was experimentation. So I think all of you probably can look back to 2020 and see the fun live video that you tried to post. I sure look back and say, wow, I looked really bad with that haircut. And just some of the other technological things. But I think for many of us, including myself, it was an experiment. What do we need to do? And I think as we think about the topic of how this is titled, what I saw during COVID was, when we couldn't see people physically, there was something about being present online. There's a woman at our church, her name's Chris Perez. She lives by herself. She had recently lost her roommate, who is a very, very good friend of hers, and she was living all by herself. Pretty much every night she would send me a Facebook message when I did a live video. She said, I feel so alone, but I feel so connected to you. That was kind of the power that I began to see of people feeling, I'm anxious, I'm scared, I'm worried. They needed to see a pastor's face. They needed to hear my voice. They needed to hear other people's voice. Our senior pastor was in the game. There's other individuals that were there that during this time of experimentation, though we're not doing all the things that we used to do, we were connecting with people. And all during that time, too, we talked about the Why God Why podcast. Our mission statement is this: we exist to respond to the questions that people don't feel comfortable asking in church. Guess what? From 2020 to 2021, there was a lot of questions people didn't feel comfortable asking in church. So between engaging the pandemic, between engaging the protests and the racial reckoning, the polarized politics, we were bringing individuals who didn't live in Rochester, some who did, to have conversations to connect with people during this time, to connect on a sense of maybe not everything we think about Christians is correct, number one, but then number two, to help the people we serve to engage and think about what's going on, not just in a biblical way, but also in a gracious way, to unite generations together. And, interesting, when I teach a class, that's in person, I get a lot of feedback. When you send a podcast out, I should probably knock on wood, but that's probably not appropriate for a church conference. I don't get a lot of email feedback of saying this is how you're supposed to do it. And when I began to talk with people during this time, even if they disagreed with one of the guests that we had on that moment, it gave them a perspective that they could safely receive without feeling like it was right in front of them. So during that time of experimentation, and we'll get to the next part, we learned a lot about connecting with people online. You know, I told you about all the Facebook groups, and one of the things pre-COVID, every night of the week, there was a ministry that met at Browncroft. So on Sunday mornings, we had a marriage class. On Monday, it was women's ministry with probably 6 or 7 small groups. On Tuesdays, it was men's ministry. On Thursday, we had just stopped another marriage class. And so on top of that, and these are all ministries I inherited, but it was interesting as we were in the middle of COVID, we found small groups were really important and people were kind of okay. There's some that felt very strongly about these ministries going away. We in some ways had we had a moment of truth of being what is essential for us to do as a church. But I'll talk more about that. I'm going to throw back to Grace with post-COVID.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah. Before we go to post-COVID, just hold it on the screen. But before we go to post-COVID, I want to share one more thing that happened during COVID and our interactions and what we had to do. There were a couple of times that we had to close down comments. I didn't really want to, but we were being hacked. And so I just want to share that out there with you. I don't know if any of you experienced that, but I just wanted to let you know that that we did have someone who was in charge of just watching what was going on online in the comments, researching responses, and also using our commentator, our commentator to help us with that. So pastor would talk, the commentator would talk, I would encourage people to put questions in the chat, and also at one point I did have to close down the comment section, not the chat, but the comment section, because we were being hacked. So I just wanted to share that with you. So we're going to go on to post-COVID. We learned a lot of things from COVID. We learned that evangelism is very important. Not that we did not know that, but connecting with people is very important, because a lot of people were going through a lot of depression during COVID. A lot of young people in particular were having to work from their home, and so they were becoming very, very isolated. So a lot of our work was pastoral counseling, just taking care of each other. So what we did was all of the ministries, we call them auxiliaries in our churches, in our church, they were connecting with each other through their small groups as well. And so that way we were able to keep a connection going on Zoom. Our youth ministry was on Zoom. Our women's ministry was on Zoom. So any auxiliary in the church that felt a need to meet, they could meet. And we provided a small church as we are. We found it important to provide the resources that were needed to get them to be able to connect. So at Zion Hill, we call members that join online digital disciples. They connect with us through YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and other traditional methods. Whatever we need to do to connect to people on their comfort level, that's what we do. We've asked them how we can fellowship and give them spiritual support. And we started with a general conversation. How are you today? How is your family? And that's how we start the conversation. Some have requested membership via social media platforms from all over the country, and some of them still attend our Bible studies and revivals, and we are looking forward to expanding the ministries through even more Christian content on the social media. So we know that social media has this great propensity to influence our thinking. So we want social media channel to influence their thinking about the church, their thinking about God, their thinking about Christ, and we want to be an impact on their lives. So currently, the way we're engaging with people, some of our members are totally on social media platforms, and that's okay, because they don't wish to change that. So we meet people where they are. Some of the members have returned back in person, and that's okay. And others of the members are half online, half in-house. And all of this is okay. We realize that in the society and in the age that we live, not everyone is coming back to the church building. But we have a responsibility for reaching them wherever they are. And many of them are on social media platforms. And I do believe that technology gives us great opportunities for reaching people and helping them in this thing called life. All of us go through our challenges. People are meeting each other on social media. Why not have them meet each other on our Christian channel? You see what I'm saying? So we have continued to expand our technology ministry, and we're looking forward to creating integrative Christian content. We're looking forward to getting involved in the city of Rochester to bridge the gap in the digital, bridge the gap and be more inclusive as it comes to technology, giving people access. There are some governmental programs that are out there where you can get free internet access. I don't have the website here with me, but that is a resource. There are libraries out here in which advocate for digital inclusion to help decrease the digital divide. And it's real, folk. In the city of Rochester, African Americans and Hispanics are less likely to have digital devices where they can connect with us than white people and others. And that's Hispanics included with African Americans. That is a big problem. Some people have internet access, some people do not. And that's what the digital divide is. It is not fair. It is unacceptable. So as a church, we have to reach out and be an advocate in the communities where people are not connected to the world. Everything we do now is connected to this technology. Therefore, the love of Christ pushes us to be concerned about everyone, to love everyone, and to give everyone access. So that's what our mission is. That's where we're going. Lynn Sweet said, And Lynn Sweet is a professor emeritus at Drew Theological School at Drew University. And this is what he said: "We will always have immigrants and naturals because of the digital divides. He advises everyone to keep up with the use of Twitter and other social media platforms because it is our greatest means for evangelism in the 21st century." Do you agree with me? Do you agree with Sweet? Snap your fingers. I like that. Peter?
Like always, it's kind of hard to follow that. Went to church there, but I think many of you are here because you're reflecting on the fact that we got done with COVID, quote unquote done. I mean, we can technically almost say that now. And what we thought was, we just want to go back to normal. So the mistake that Browncroft made was there's this pressure. We need to get people back into church. And we began looking at the playbook from 1995. You know, we need to do more events. We need to do more stuff. And the problem that I take responsibility for was, you know, we didn't really negotiate or reflect on where is our world at. You know, here's the deal. I have more coffees and one-on-one lunches now than I did pre-COVID. I have less events for 30 to 40 people than I did pre-COVID. So what happened in my life was, as a pastor, and we're talking about pastoring in digital spaces, those one-on-one conversations became vitally important. But what we did on a larger scale, whether it was the podcast, whether it was social media, or whether it was church online, was reaching people that we couldn't see. And the number one problem with digital ministry in the church is we assume that if we can't see them, we're not ministering to them. And so what's been going on, and we've made, the first year after COVID was really difficult because there was a lot of just conversations, and I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of things that I would have handled differently. But I make the joke now, in some ways, in-person ministry, our discipleship pathways, it got easier. But the digital world, it's becoming more complicated. And so, like a good pastor, I'll sum up, you know, these 3 stages of COVID with 3 points that are alliterated. You know, first, we had to become early adopters. And I wish we would have done that more. And then during COVID, we had to experiment. And I would encourage you to think about, what does it look like to experiment? And now we're in a season of enhancement. So for example, with Why God Why, we're actually taking 2 months off to reflect on what are the issues, and even from what Mark Matlock talked about, what are the things that we need to do for people that are on the fringes of coming to Browncroft that are interested in Jesus? What questions are they asking? You know, this is our platform to help people know, hey, if I walk into Browncroft, they know the issues that I'm dealing with. And even with our live stream services, you know, I have to say this all the time. You know, I think that there's people that we think that they're just lazy and they're not coming back to church. And I would say this, there's a very, very small minority of that. Because when I look at people online, there's actually a lot of shut-ins that can't get out of their house. There's people that are anxious and depressed that literally it's a miracle that they showed up online. There's also many, many individuals that are checking the church out. I don't know about you, but every time I go to a new restaurant, the first place I go is Google or Yelp. If you don't think that they're doing that with your church, then you're sorely mistaken. And I don't say that to be discouraging. I say that to encourage you. For us to live incarnationally and to pastor, it does take the corporate side of the church, which is the bigger part, but then also as individuals. You know, it's funny, when I go to church on Sunday, most conversations start with, I saw this post online. I saw that you did this. And when we talk about the word enhancement, it's looking to redeem this space that we've been given. We tried really hard to end as quickly as we could. So what we're going to do is we want to give you, there's resources in a handout. I'm going to jump to this last page. We actually have a Canva device. You can go from there. But we have Ryan in back. He's actually roaming around with a microphone. We wanted to tell our stories because we can go inside baseball with you. And, you know, I don't know what HTML code is. Grace probably knows more about websites than I do. But we wanted to kind of give this time back to you to maybe ask some questions, or, Grace and I can riff. I grew up Pentecostal, believe it or not, so I know what's up. So we'll take any of the questions. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you guys very much. Appreciate your stories. I've been really struggling with how to engage in digital discipleship as a pastor at a relatively small church. And I find digital ministry to be so on demand for the congregant. Like it's on their time when like sending a message or something like that. And so individualized to whatever platform they happen to be using and feel comfortable with. How do you prioritize what social media or what digital discipleship tools you're engaging in, and how do you keep boundaries? You talk about like that story of somebody sending you a message every single day. That sounds overwhelming to me with a congregation of 50, let alone a congregation of a few hundred. If you have a bunch of people sending you a message every single day, I feel overwhelmed by the idea of trying to respond to that much as a solo pastor.
So let me just clarify. That was just during the pandemic, and they were good. They were good messages. So they weren't like, "Holy cow, I'm getting the message from Sister Johnson. She must be upset about something." So they weren't those ones. But I think there's actually two things. And your name is Ryan. Are you Ryan Revito? It's nice to meet you in person. There you go. So two things. So number one, I would say start with the platform where most of your congregation is. So if they're on Facebook, go to Facebook and encourage them to engage, talk. If they're on YouTube, this resource has a ton of different strategies. But the second thing is, it's kind of counterintuitive. One of the things that I want to credit our discipleship pastor, John Amayo, for is we need more messages about rhythms and Sabbath. You want to get more millennials and Gen Zers at church when it comes to technology, start talking about Sabbath. And when people start experiencing Sabbath in your staff, and if you're a solo pastor with the elders, hey, I just want to let you all know my Sabbath is Saturday from 8 p.m. Friday night to 8 p.m. on Saturday. Once you start setting those expectations for yourself and your elders and even the congregation, I think that begins to change. And it's funny, Northeastern, for the last 25 years, has been talking about Sabbath and rhythms. It's amazing that when people kind of grasp that, it begins to change. I don't know, Grace, would you add anything to that?
It's hard for me to say no to people. So whenever there's a post or whenever there's something that I can't get to right away, I'll just message them and say, I can't get to it right now. I'll get back with you. Also, as far as the medium in which we use, it depended upon the content that I was sharing. If I was sharing something about trying to teach someone how to use something, I did on-the-job training. So what I would ask them to do is download. I would walk them through downloading Zoom on their devices, and we would just do some experimenting. When I was setting up people's emails for them.
Wait, you set people's emails up?
I did.
There is like a special place in heaven for that.
But it was a lot of fun. So it depends on what your personality is like and how many are on your staff and where their beginning steps are. That's how we decided where to start. We had a YouTube channel that wasn't being used. And so what we did was just say, okay, well, this is going to be it for right now. It would have been easier to start with Facebook because it's easier to get a cell phone and you don't have to pay a lot of money to get out there. But we wanted something to be in more of a stable place where people could go back and watch our services, could still make comments in the chat, and then during the week we could later on we could see who was sick, we could see who needed a phone call. People did a lot of things in the chat, so it was helpful.
I saw that hand back there. Yeah, we'll start, and then we'll go. Yeah. No, you. Yeah, standing up.
Hello, everyone. I remember a number of years back, when they were pushing those satellites up into the air, and Congress had passed the idea that if we allow for the satellites to go up and all the stuff to deal with bandwidth, that the deal on the table was that the rural communities and the urban communities and suburban communities would all have access, which really deals with Sister Grace's, the one up there with the wings on. Yeah, that's you. It would have cut that great divide that has been created because they reneged on that, and Congress never held those companies to be responsible for what they had agreed upon doing. My question to you, as a collection of diverse churches from a suburban and urban area, how important is it to drive this issue to bring the rural community into a place where the bandwidth has not been provided according to the agreement, so that everyone has an opportunity to have access to it, not just the haves versus the have-nots?
My wife, as a mental health therapist, tells me all the time, she says, "Pastor, stay in your lane." I'm not going to dodge that question, but I haven't researched a ton about that. But one of the things I think I've learned from Grace that the church is going to have to deal with, and I don't have a ton of just experience with it, is, in seeing the whole person, some of the needs, like the internet, is actually a place where I think the church can advocate. And there's two ways I think the church can advocate. Number one is listen. There are people in our churches, like if I meet someone that doesn't have internet, I'm going to be calling Grace, the next day.
Go ahead.
And then
I can't say no.
The second thing is, I think what Grace did better than I did was creating these mentoring relationships with people from younger generations to older generations. I mean, that's something that I think Browncroft could do. I can't speak to the policy, but I definitely think if, that's an issue, but you probably have more to say about that.
Some people do not know that there are already policies in place. So that's one step that that the church can start. Be aware that there are already policies in place. Be aware of where people can go to inquire about free or subsidized internet. Our church is in the city of Rochester. You would think that we had high-speed internet everywhere, but it's not the case. So when individuals were working toward that effect, like Brother Bale said, Reverend Bale said, monies went toward rural and suburban access to internet rather than city access to internet. So as a result, when we inquired with the internet providers, internet service providers, we were told that our church was not in an area where we could get high-speed internet. Well, it turns out that in order to do live streaming, you have to have at least 30 to 35 upload speeds. I think at one Sunday we checked the speeds and they were like 7 or 8. 2, he said it was 2. So you know that there were times that our services were cut off. In the middle of services, we were doing services and I was singing, and then somebody called on the telephone Y'all are not up. We knew we weren't up, so it was a challenge just talking to the internet providers to get us to a place where we could connect. And it was expensive to get the uploads that we needed, but we found it as something that we needed to do, and that was important. Okay, I think we have another question.
I'm sure everybody could tell a story or two about, let's just say, negative comments that happened on our church's websites, Google reviews, whatever else. Do you find it's better to ignore or to try and respond in some diplomatic fashion to comments? I know there's no absolute rule, but that's my question.
We never get negative comments, so I don't know. I'll let you go first this time.
I am kind of like a conflict resolutioner. So I like to hear what people have to say. But when they get on and they post something in the chat, we feel like we have to shut it down. But that doesn't stop us from connecting with that person, because a lot of times they feel somehow comfortable enough to put that up there. So we should feel comfortable enough to talk to them about it. And that's just me.
There's a difference between trolls and then individuals that have legitimate feedback questions. And so for the trolls, shut it down. But there's some people that, as John Gottman, who's a psychologist, would say, it's a bid. And so you now have a visible opportunity to share the love of Jesus in the way that you respond. If you Google this, Sarah Silverman, who's a comedian, isn't necessarily, I don't think she's a Christian, but there's a Twitter thread where in the middle of somebody degrading her, she responds back with things like, it sounds like you have a lot of pain and hurt in your life. And you begin to watch this thread, I can't help but think about Jesus. And so, number one, pray. That's not just a last case solution, but also, remember that there's a person behind that screen before you make a step like that. I think we can take one more. There's 4 minutes left, so right there. Oh.
A lot of public conversation about the harmful aspects of social media, in particular for teenage girls. So I'm wondering about limitations. Do you articulate any limitations on digital discipleship? Or another way to think of that question, are there ways that you build bridges into live fellowship from the digital?
So when we started our Bible study, we try to encourage people to encourage each other in the chat. And so one of the things that we have done is to ask people to respect other people's position on things and to have it discussed verbally through our pastor or through our commentator. So some of the things that we don't, let's put it like this, we do not allow people to degrade and tear each other down in the comment section.
Yeah, I'm thinking about some of the critique of social media generally, is it takes people away from relationship.
Oh, okay.
I would challenge that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think our students are probably more connected, and I'd say male and female are more connected than ever before. I think there is a loneliness factor. She's gonna hate that I'm doing this, but Alyssa Matz is our MSW. She graduated from Roberts. I know that she's on the front grounds. I'd encourage you to talk with her, but I think this kind of goes back to our larger kind of conversation, which is what's old is new again. And so I think we have to be modeling for our students what it looks like to have digital Sabbaths, what it looks like to put things down. And I also think, too, with students, it's asking them kind of what they're walking through and going through, building that trust. This has been the whole conference. If you learn nothing else from this conference except to sit with a student and say, hey, tell me about your relationship with social media. Tell me what you love about it. Tell me what you hate about it. I think that's when you begin to bring trust. And I think it was Isaiah Santiago this morning that said, before you jump to advice, make sure you listen. I think there's a lot of assumptions about social media and students, but I think that sometimes we don't take the time to ask them what they think or even what their solutions might be. You might be surprised when you actually engage a student or someone like that. Phoebe, one more or no?
And they have a lot to say. Oh, we're good.
Wait, I got one more. If you get up during this, we won't judge you. Maybe we'll silently judge you. I don't know.
It's a quick one. I just want to know, post-COVID, where are your support groups? Are they online? Are they in person? Are they hybrid? How did you adjust after COVID with your support groups?
So we have Celebrate Recovery every Tuesday night. That's all in person. All of our small groups are in person. We haven't at Browncroft experienced kind of this getting back to or staying online. I had a small group leader that was in Massachusetts that led one Zoom group. He was going to be moving to Rochester. He actually passed away, but his group is kind of continuing to get connected. So I think when it comes to digital technology, at least for Browncroft, most of it is kind of the general big picture things along with the micro, myself being available online. But the good news is I think Grace has a different story, and I'll let her add in.
Well, we are still online for our Bible study because people have told us that that's where they want to meet us. It's easier for them, and they enjoy it. But at the same time, we're in the point of expanding our Sunday school in-house. So prior to COVID, we had 2 services. During COVID, we moved down to 1 service. So now that frees up 45 minutes for us to have in-person Christian education, which some people are showing an interest in. But there are still some small groups meeting online.
Can you give it up for Grace? Isn't she awesome?
Peter's too kind.
So Phoebe's been awesome. Can you give a hand for Phoebe, too? We're so glad.
Give her a hand clap.
If you're going to say nice things about this session, go to nes.edu/rebuild. If you're going to say mean things, just go outside and scream. No, I'm just kidding.
Tell it to us in our face.
So anyways, we're so glad you're here. Thanks for sticking around for another minute. We'll hang out here for a little bit. Let me say a quick word of prayer. God, I thank you for the individuals here. I pray that you'd bless them. Lord, I pray that you'd guide them. And I know that we're about to have a commissioning service. Lord, I just pray that as they commit to following you and loving their congregations and their neighbors well, I pray that you'd lead them into the right place. And we pray this all in your name. Amen.
Amen. Anyone interested in learning eCam Live? I can show you a demo of it. So I'll be in the back. Thank you all for your attention. And thank you, Phoebe.